Welcome to Changing Higher Ed, a podcast dedicated to helping higher education leaders improve their institutions. With your host, Dr. Drum McNaughton, CEO of The Change Leader, a consultancy that helps higher ed leaders holistically transform their institutions. Learn more at thechangeleader.com. Changing Higher Ed is sponsored by Blackbaud, the world's leading cloud software company powering social good. With their cloud solution for higher education, Blackbaud connects thousands of campuses worldwide. Visit blackbaud.com/highered to learn how they can help your institution deliver a better experience. And now, here's your host, Drum McNaughton.
Thank you, David. Today's special guest is Dr. Tony Allen, Delaware State University's 12th president. Since assuming the role on January 1st of this year, he's not let any moss grow underneath his feet. Besides having to deal with COVID and a following perception of the value of higher ed, he's bringing his broad expertise from banking and higher ed to chart a new course for the institution. Tony's had a long history in higher ed and corporate America, having been speechwriter for then Senator Joe Biden, and he worked at Bank of America for many years in communications. But what Tony's going to become known for is the progressive and frankly corporate strategy for Delaware State's growth, acquiring Wesley College, a private liberal arts college in Dover, Delaware, thus making Delaware State the first HBCU to acquire an institution that's not a historically black college or university. This merger is a great example of an alternative strategy for growing institutions and making sure students are well cared for, and we're happy to have him join us to talk about how the acquisition's going. Tony, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, my friend.
Well, it's great to have you, and you are going through something now that is one of those things that we've talked about on the podcast before, mergers and an alternative strategy for growing an institution. Tell me a little bit about the background on that, if you would, please.
Sure, Drum. I can tell you it's been a very, very interesting process for us. Delaware State University's vision is to be the most diverse contemporary HBCU in America. And one of our big bets is that we believe we can grow our institution from what is about 5,000 now to about 10,000 over the next 5 to 7 years. In order for us to do that, we need two things. Obviously, more students who look like our students, and we need more capacity as it relates to physical infrastructure to attract those students and to make sure that our faculty and staff feel like it's a first-class institution all the way around. So Wellesley is literally 2 miles down the street from Delaware State University. It has about 20 buildings on 50 acres of land right in downtown Dover, which is outside of downtown Dover. And their students look like ours, which is to say that they, in the way that we are a historically black college university, Wellesley is a minority-serving institution. They weren't always that way, but the face of that institution has changed over the years. So as we watched them think about where they needed to be in the landscape, we thought it was a really interesting opportunity, particularly as I took over the presidency, to go to them directly and see if this would be something they'd be interested in. And thankfully, at least so far, it's worked out quite nicely, as we signed our agreement for Delaware State to acquire Wellesley just about 2 weeks ago now. So now we're a little bit in the transition year before we actually a fully integrated organization.
Well, that sounds really good. And of course, you're not letting any moss grow underneath your feet. You started the position there at Delaware State the beginning of this year. So you've got COVID, you've got online, and now you've got an acquisition merger. You don't like exciting times, do you?
You know what's interesting? I was saying this earlier. I've been chasing Delaware State for a long time. I'm a Delaware guy. I believe in the institution in very profound ways. So when I was able to come here as provost and then be elevated to the presidency, I took it very seriously. I think we have an amazing story to tell, but not enough storytellers. So I wanted to make sure that folks knew our rich history. And then we thought really carefully about how to grow into who we are supposed to become. So I think a lot of people would say Tony, in the middle of all of this, not even just the pandemic, but also that, but the growing unrest over systemic racism, all those kinds of things, I could be paying attention to something else. But I think these are the types of things I need to be paying attention to. Growing a very proud Black institution that has faced real challenges and laid down traditional thinking for innovation to really build more capacity and opportunity for those who are often underserved or overlooked by the system.
Well, that makes great sense. So why Wellesley? What is it that you get from Wellesley? What is it that they're going to get from you?
So when you think about the institutions from a student perspective, it's a very similar student demographic. Just to give you a sense, we have about 55% in-state Delaware students. They have 57. As I said, they're a minority serving institution. We're historically Black college or university. Our programs have a lot of similarities and synergies between them, particularly in the health sciences, which is also interesting to us. When you think about it just from a pure financial play, they are valued at about $34 million or so, have reasonably little debt, and we believe we have a broader model that can support the institution going forward. So for us, it gives us, as I said, 20 buildings on 50 acres of land right in the place where we need to be as it relates to central Dover. And I believe once it's done, will help us continue to rival our sister institutions in the region and across the country.
Well, that makes all the good sense from a business perspective. How about a culture perspective? Have you gotten that far looking at those sort of things?
You know, I think that's the next big leg here. I have told many people since we announced the deal that Wesley has great brand equity in Dover and in Delaware writ large. And while we don't want to lose that brand equity as we move forward, we also want to build capacity for Delaware State to really expand its footprint more thoughtfully. So I think a lot of that has to do with making sure that you know the people on the other side of the table. You're willing to understand and hear what their hopes and aspirations are. You want to match that with what you are thinking about as well, and then build new and better for the future. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen. But I do agree that, as you know, cultural fit is key to a lot of this. And I believe having been one that has gone through being acquired by someone else, taking the time to find the right cultural fit, take kind of the best of both institutions is exactly what we're planning to do.
Well, I can hear your business background coming through, and it makes perfect sense in what you're doing. Mergers are so different. They're becoming more, I wouldn't say commonplace, but they're occurring more often in higher ed as a very reasonable growth strategy. Now, going forward, or even before that, you had to do some selling, I would think, on this with your governing board. Am I right?
That's right, Drum. And the only thing I would tell you is, it is really an acquisition. It's not a merger of equals. So Delaware State taking a leadership position here was still an important sell to make to our trustees and some key stakeholders across the community. But as I said, we know that we have a significant track record, 130 years, graduating some of the finest students in the state, particularly those who are students of color. We also have grown what we believe is a very serious research portfolio across a number of disciplines. And we think that the addition of Wesley into our portfolio would expand us exponentially in that regard. So making the case for both why and why now was definitely part of how we pitched it to our board, who have on the likes of it 2 governors on our board. So they asked very good and thoughtful questions. A number of business folks, a number of alum from Delaware State also sit on the board, and folks who all care about Delaware writ large. So as we were able to make the case, we certainly got the right kind of feedback from them to make sure we're doing it the right way. And we have enough toll gates in place along the way that we can pause, kind of see where we are, see if we're meeting our goals effectively as we take each step along the way. That's one of the reasons the year of transition is so critically important for us.
Let's talk a little bit about those toll gates, because those are one of the things that are so critical. Some people call them toll gates like you do. Some call them key performance metrics, but really they're things that you have to hit each way along. And that brings up the need for incredibly strong project management throughout.
Yeah, let me tell you a little bit about that. First of all, there are some contingencies outlined in our acquisition agreement that must be met in order for us to get to what effectively is known as legal day one next June. First, we need to make sure that we can secure enough sufficient private and government funding to make sure that we can manage the transition effectively. The second is obviously, as you know, our regulatory body, the Middle States Commission on Higher Education, needs to approve the deal. We've actually submitted our preliminary applications to that score. There are some core efficiencies we believe that we can gain because of some of our bigger contracts. Wesley and Delaware State have the same IT provider. Wesley and Delaware State have the same food services provider. So we think as they come together, we're going to get some cost efficiencies there. And then to your point, the successful transition plan is pretty important. And I believe that having a PMO, a project management office along the way, is going to give us the roadmap for the future. As we were doing our due diligence, we had an independent consultant who was a former executive vice president at a major college, really alongside us as we looked at why this would be beneficial to us. We're going to keep them on board, but also add a little bit more heft for a broader consultancy too of national consequence that we think is going to be helpful to us as well.
And I think those, being a consultant, I would say absolutely hire my brothers. But it really is to have someone who's been there, done it, gone through it. They understand, not only what needs to happen, but they understand where the potential pitfalls can be. And that latter can be even as important, if not more so, as you're going through your process.
Yeah, I completely agree. As you well know, the business model is what's most attractive in any deal like this. Our vision is that we can grow significantly by effectively having more students right at the start of the agreement, but then being able to sort of grow into our skin, for lack of a better term. I can tell you that we have grown 40% over the last 10 years in student enrollment. Just to give you a sense, over that same 10-year period, colleges and universities in the aggregate have declined 5.5%. So we've been able to sort of buck the trend as it relates to growth, but the space requirements have still given us significant restrictions along those lines. So when we think about what the right business model looks like and what the optimal portfolio mix is between residential and international and online and the program offerings, once we get that right mix, we think that Wellesley offers us a very good opportunity to take a significant part of our residential mix on the student side, and then our health services offerings on the program side to really build something special over time.
That makes perfect sense. You've got to have those synergies between the two institutions. And it sounds like you found a great partner to dance with.
Yeah, I can tell you that I've watched Wesley closely. We're the second smallest state in the union, so lots of Delawareans care about a lot of things in Delaware, and certainly Wesley was one of those institutions. So we watched them closely. We think their programs are excellent. They have faced very similar concerns that many private liberal colleges have faced since the turn of the 21st century. And they've been trying to find somebody who can partner in a thoughtful way, preserve the students that they have, and grow more holistically. They took a couple of shots down the field with a couple of partners, and then we came a-calling, and we think that when we did, we offered the best path forward for them.
It also makes sense from a public and private partnership type of thing. Wesley will become, originally from Massachusetts, and my brain is wired to Wellesley.
Understood.
Yeah. So, Wesley being a private institution, they'll become a public institution. And that creates great benefits for them as well, in some ways.
No, you're right. You're right about that. When you think about, as I said, there is some significant brand equity in the Wellesley name that we want to be thoughtful about. But I can envision any number of configurations between the two institutions. Some folks have talked about sort of a Wesley campus at Delaware State University. Others have talked about a new Wesley College of Health and Behavioral Sciences at Delaware State University. All of those things I think are interesting to us. We're also taking this year to think through what the best configuration optimally is for us as we move forward, and what we believe is going to attract more quality faculty and staff, more quality students, and continue to build our footprint across a wide array of disciplines.
Now that you've got the deal signed, this is when the real work starts, because all of those things you just mentioned, you've got to figure out and then integrate.
You really do. You really do. As I said, I've gone through one of these in my life as the acquired. And if you do it well, you're really taking the best of both institutions and hopefully shedding yourself of some things that may have beleaguered each institution as well. As my mother would say, you eat the meat and throw the bones away. So we're really being thoughtful about what we think is great about Wellesley, how we at Delaware State can be more efficient and effective as well, and ultimately how we can serve more students and give them more opportunities for the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds, and trying to find a merger partner similar to how you and Wellesley have gone about this. There's a reason why the first couple of times down the dance floor, they didn't find the right partner. It takes a lot of really digging down to find those synergies. And it sounds like you've done that work.
Well, I would say we're doing that work. You know, when you decide that you want to acquire another institution, we think it's a part of being deliberate, recognizing that there are going to be surprises along the way, trying your best to be prepared for those surprises, being laser focused on the job at hand, which is why we think having some broader consultancy support is going to be critical to it. And then being really thoughtful and I'd say hopeful about a business model that could really change the face of Kent County. And I might argue the state of Delaware overall. So having a compelling mission like being the most diverse contemporary HBCU in America, the Wellesley strategy, as I said, fit very nicely into that. Now we got to make sure that we are executing flawlessly each and every day on it.
It sounds to me as though you had a strategic vision for Delaware State when you came into the position and that you're executing on it. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, this gets us a significant way down the road on our ultimate vision. And, you know, I am blessed to have had the opportunity to be the provost at Delaware State for 2 years prior. So I knew the institution because I grew up in Delaware, but to really have a sense of the possibilities and where we could take the institution as the chief academic officer gave me a lot more insight than an incoming president without that knowledge. And I've been thinking about both the vision and the things that align to that vision that are really right around us. I always like to think first, what is right around us that we can amplify? And this became a unique, very specific opportunity for us. As you probably know, just because they're 2 miles down the road, we already do a fair amount with Wellesley. Informally, we actually own a very historic theater with them, 50-50, right in downtown Dover as well. So as they started looking for partners, I just thought again that we can amplify our own mission, vision, and strategy with this unique purchase. And it seems to make a lot of sense for the city and the state. So hopefully it will all pan out as we have going forward. But the early reports are that folks are seeing it favorably. They understand what they believe the impact will be. And I think they're going to give us a shot to both support it and ultimately make it wildly successful.
And I certainly hope it is that way. It sounds like you're moving down the right path. Let's talk a little bit about the communications, because we are getting close to the end of our time here.
Sure.
Your communications are critical. What have you been doing up to this point to communicate with faculty, staff at both institutions?
Really what we have done vis-a-vis the presidents, myself on my end and President Bob Clark on the Wesley end, is make sure that we're answering their questions in a very uniform fashion. So Bob and I regularly meet, probably twice a week, although we talk more frequently than that. We really coordinated the announcement itself. So in addition to one release, we had a joint press conference. Both my board chair and his board chair were there. And we wanted to be able to really articulate what we thought were key messages that would extend to alumni, faculty, staff, and students on both sides of the organization. The next step now is to make sure that we are what I like to call standing and delivering in front of those audiences, myself to Wesley and some Wesley partners to Del State, both in a way that we are hearing what some of Wesley's needs are, what some of their obvious anxieties might be, and communicating what we believe the opportunity is for both institutions. So that is becoming much more deliberate as we go down the road here. We've just put together our leadership teams over the last week and a half or so, and I expect that more of that will come as we start down the more formal process.
And as that saying goes, you can never over-communicate.
That's exactly right. I was in the comms and corporate affairs world for about 15 years at Bank of America, and most notably during the financial crisis. So I do believe that you have to tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them again, and make sure that you can deliver on the promises that you're making to your constituencies, which you also think is very important.
Exactly. And then tell them again, and tell them again, and tell them again. And then tell them that I told you again.
Yeah.
So we're coming up to the end of our time, Tony. What are 3 takeaways for your fellow presidents if they're going to head down this path?
I always go back to this, and I don't mean to be long-winded here, but we took on the children of undocumented workers probably about 5 years ago now. So there are more dreamers that come to Delaware State than any other university in the country, at a point where we have much personal pride about. When we did that, some people said, well, is that in line with your mission? You're a historically Black college and university. And what I know is it's completely aligned with our mission, because when we started, we were developed for students of color, particularly Black students, who were underserved or locked out of the higher education system. And the same case is being made for the dreamers. So I use that as job number one. Is a decision like this connected with your mission? As I said, Wesley, minority serving institution, Wesley, clear, excellent programs that are very compatible to ours in a community that we both care about. So that's job one. Does it really compel itself to your mission? 2, be thoughtful about it. What we thought about a lot was, do we go through this agreement and kind of make the deal now? Or do we sign an agreement that gives us a year to be thoughtful about what a real transition will look like, recognizing there will be lots and ups and downs along the way, and toll gates, as I mentioned. So really take the time to not only do the due diligence up front, but give yourself enough room to do it throughout that transition process. And the final thing I'd say is really engage your board of directors. And in my instance, we spent a lot of time and continue to spend a lot of time thinking about the real value proposition that Wesley brings to Delaware State, which cannot be overstated. So having those tough conversations, sometimes they are tough, but having those tough conversations before you make the big decisions, I think, is crucially important. And and I know you said 3, but the last one I would say is always, if you can, under promise and over deliver. So our sense is, do this thoughtfully, and then really go for what you think you can accomplish in a big and meaningful way. But under promise and over deliver.
In golf, we call that sandbagging. Well, that's great, Tony. So what's next for you?
Delaware State is so dear to me. Like I said, I've been chasing this place for 10 years now. So to have this opportunity at this moment in time, I think particularly with the global pandemic and the civil unrest is really divinely inspired in my view. And I want to be sensitive to that and give this my very best. So my hope is that they'll have me here for a long time, and I'll be able to do my part in a history of great leaders at this institution, do my part while I had the baton.
I have no doubt of that. Well, sir, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on the show. And if I may ask you if we could check back from time to time, just see how things going. Would that be okay?
Drum, this was fun. Anytime, my friend.
Thank you, sir. Well, I certainly appreciate your being on the show.
All right. Take care of yourself.
And you too. Thanks for listening this week. And a special thank you to this week's special guest, Dr. Tony Allen, Delaware State University's 12th president. And for Tony sharing with us his insights on the merger of Delaware State and Wesley College. We'll check back with Tony from time to time to see how the process is going. I also want to give a special shout out to our sponsor, Blackbaud. Visit blackbaud.com/highered to learn about their cloud fundraising, accounting, education management, scholarship, and analytics solutions that are powering some of higher ed's top institutions. Our next guest is Dr. Philip Dearborn, president of the Association of Biblical Higher Education. Philip recently succeeded Dr. Ralph Enlow as president of ABHE, and we'll be speaking to him about how COVID is changing Christian higher ed and what's new and in store at ABHE.
This episode of Changing Higher Ed was brought to you by Blackbaud, the world's leading cloud software company powering social good. Be sure to visit blackbaud.com/highered to learn how they can help your institution deliver a better experience from admissions to advancement. Changing Higher Ed is a production of The Change Leader, a consultancy committed to transforming higher ed institutions. Find more information about this topic, along with show notes on this episode at changinghighered.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to the show. We would also value your honest rating and review. Email any questions, comments, or recommendations for topics or guests to podcast@changinghighered.com. Changing Higher Ed is produced and hosted by Dr. Drum McNaughton, post-production by David L. White.